Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here at my next YouTube video, and this is going to be a kind of different video. I'm just going to discuss an avatar topic on camera, and the one I really want to talk about here is the first avatar. And I've kind of been keeping back on doing a video like this for a while. You'll probably have heard some of my thoughts on this topic in relation to the whole the first avatar news on the Avatar Online podcast, but I really wanted to do a video just talking specifically about this topic with nothing else planned. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, and I'll get to one eventually and that sort of stuff, what we know. But I really want to talk about the background to it, why I think us learning about Wan and how the first Avatar came into being, that sort of stuff, is going to be so crucial and big once we find out about it in Beginnings Part 1 and Part 2 in Korra Book 2 Spirits. Why I think it's going to be so important, and that's just game changing as well. A lot of stuff that we knew is going to be finally revealed to us, and I'm really going to start, I suppose, by giving background on that and why I think there's going to be a lot of questions answered, asked, and stuff like this in relation to these two episodes. So I'm going to just start with something kind of. I'll get to the first Avatar eventually, but the nations. I think this is an interesting concept because, what are the nations called? They're called the Water Tribes, the Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation, and then there's the Air Nomads from the Air Temples. So the nations are called what they are in relation to the element that the people of that nation bend. Sorry, not build. So there you have it. That to some extent, bending in a way defines each nation, and that's why it's called what it's called. Now it's changed a bit in Korra's time with Republic City, but we're not really talking about that here. We're talking about more of Aang's time here. But we know that there is an era where humans couldn't bend because the Lion Turtle says in the era before the Avatar, we bent not the elements but the energy within ourselves. So that kind of is hinting at energy bending, but I'll get to that eventually too. So there was an era where humans couldn't bend. So were the nations still called like Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation at that time, or were they just called something different? That sort of thing. That's going to be interesting if we get that revealed in Wan's time and those episodes. We don't know what sort of a bender he is, so that's up in the air still, too. Now, from there, I think the big question to ask is when did bending come into play, and how big of a role does that play in the creation of the Avatar? So there's 4 important points in time to talk about here. The main one I suppose that we know about would be Oma and Shu learning earthbending as the first humans ever to learn earthbending from the Badger Moles. The second one would be the ancient sun warriors learning firebending from the dragons. And there's the air nomads learning airbending from the sky bison, and also waterbenders learning waterbending from the motion of the ocean and moon, that sort of thing, push and pull. Those are 4 key moments in time as to, do those 4 events occur before the first Avatar, after the Avatar, or around the same time? And this is a key moment, I think, because, as I said, it links into, are the nations actually called that? Did they eventually become named this because people learned how to bend and so on? Was the Avatar created in response to humans developing these powers and stuff like this? That's some of the key moments here. Because, the humans learned to bend in general is a huge moment in Avatar, because that gives suddenly humanity this huge thing that they didn't have before. And what's being set up, I think, in the Korra episodes that are going to flash back to this is definitely how respectful humans are of spirits. We've had it addressed at multiple times in Avatar, and it's going to be addressed in Korra. Stuff like the humans, firebenders burning down Hebai's forest, which made Hebai mad, and you see how powerful he was. So, for the first time in history at that point, you would have humans being able to, at least at some stage, to some extent, combat spirits themselves, and stuff like that. So which brings into play the idea of the conflict that seems to be happening around the creation of the first Avatar, which is more or less that the humans are fighting the spirits over something that we don't know yet. Is it over how much authority the spirits should have on the physical world? Is it over humans suddenly learning how to bend and not being so respectful to the spirits? That sort of thing. So, that's the role the Avatar, I think, is going to play in this whole thing, and that there has to be some agreement that's put in place eventually, where you have this person that is literally the bridge, the mediator between both sides, a person who's a human and also has a spirit within them, the Avatar. And that person obviously brings balance between spirits and humans, and then is asked to bring balance between the human world, between all the nations and stuff like that. That's interesting. That's interesting stuff. A lot of information I'm saying here, but I think you sort of get where I'm coming from. That a lot of stuff kind of leads up to and depends on, the first Avatar, humans learning bending, and like the names of the nations and sort of stuff, that sort of stuff. But that's why it's interesting, because obviously then you bring up the point of like, okay, what if we get to the stage where the humans haven't learned to bend at this stage, and that would make the Avatar the first human bender, and then it's after that time maybe that the Twin Law, Oma and Shu like learn to bend and stuff like that. Then you have this kind of concept that in a way the Avatar becoming the Avatar created the concept of bending or something like that. If it's the other way, and mention energy bending now. So in the era before the Avatar, we bent not the elements, but the energy within ourselves. That's an interesting concept by itself, because that suggests that before the Avatar existed, humans, or he could just be referring to line turtles, could energy bend. And that's interesting because it then suggests that energy bending is the root of all four elements, in a way that say Oma and Shu, for example, were both energy benders, and by applying that energy bending through the movements of like Badgermole or whatever, they then learned how to earthbend, and thus that's a kind of more useful skill than energy bending, and that's why energy bending kind of fell away and it more became about bending the elements. But what that suggests is that any energy bender could become a bender of all four elements. So is that where the idea of the Avatar comes into play, as not just create one person who can bend all four elements, but create this person while also limiting current energy benders and stuff like this to just bending the elements that's kind of defined by what's around them. So obviously the Earth Kingdom would be the place where most Badger Moles would be, the Fire Nation would be where most dragons would be, the Southern and Northern Water Tribe would have the best, I suppose, view of the moon, but biggest power from it, and best view of the ocean, sort of thing. And obviously the air nomads would have the sky bison near them. That idea that because they have this connection to that animal that in a way represents that element, that they then become the people of that element, which in turn creates the nations. So, is the creation of the Avatar also the creation of the four nations in a way? Is that why Roku's so eager to keep them as they are, and why he's kind of so opposed in the promise to Aang creating the idea of a nation that has all four people, which would be kind of going back to old times, maybe, if indeed the world was more spread out before then, that people are more condensed around the world, not condensed, more spread around the world, and then before the Avatar it wasn't as defined. There was no Earth nation, it was just the world, and there happened to be different places. There's no names on them depending on elements, that sort of thing. So there's a ton of speculation, a ton of questions you can ask. I assume that these episodes are going to answer these questions through us exploring stuff like one, like we're going to have to find out when he's established, before he's the Avatar, what sort of a bender he is. And say if he comes from the area that later became known as the Fire Nation, or if it is known at that time as the Fire Nation, that like he's a firebender, that's interesting in that tells us that Oma and Shu and stuff like that, as Ancient Sun Warriors haven't before um, the Avatar and stuff like that. A lot of questions will be answered just through little moments of people doing things in these episodes, and that's why I think they're going to be some of the most like watched and kind of like screenshotted through episodes in Avatar history, because so much stuff is going to be revealed in them, um, which is interesting. So let's get into the information we now know about Wan, who is the first Avatar. We don't know what nation he's from. We know he's like an explorer or something like that, so he likes to explore. We know that the animal he eventually chooses is a cat deer or something like that. So it's an animal we've never seen before, so we don't know where it like hails from or anything like that. So we have no real geography of where he is, nor do we know where any of the places seen in any of the clips or images are. One of the more recently revealed pictures is of a lot of soldiers from Wan's time, and they seem to have sort of Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation, Water Tribe sort of differentiation, but again, the image in the background is the same for all of them. So, are they all in the same place? They're just defined by different things. Again, we don't know. Are they even benders? In terms of what we've seen in the clips, we have seen one bend, but I think the only times we've seen him bend are as the Avatar. So, again, there's no reveal there. So that's interesting. And then, obviously, what we do see, which is why I mentioned it before, is him him going into the Avatar state in the middle of basically a war. Humans on one side, spirits on another side coming together, and he comes up in the Avatar state, clearly trying to stop this. We see also what appears to be him becoming the Avatar, getting blasted with some kind of energy beam. So, how does he become the Avatar as well is an interesting question. Like, if it happens in the middle of a human spirit war, apparently the only way for him to become the Avatar would be by spirits giving him this power, but that kind of will be a weird thing to happen in the middle of a war that involves spirits. But, it is interesting, nonetheless, that there would have to be this idea that the spirits and the humans would have to agree to something whereby they don't disrespect the spirits and learn to respect them in some way, and thus they keep out of human affairs for the most part, stick to the spirit world and not the mortal world that much. And obviously there would have to be an agreement about the Avatar and what sort of powers it has, what it's meant to do, as well as maybe like what happens if the Avatar goes bad, which brings up the idea that maybe Ko, we know, at least punished Ko punished Kuruk, Avatar Kuruk, for not doing his job. So is there some role that Ko plays in all this and that sort of stuff? But yeah, there's so many questions, and so little answers we know at this time. So let me get into some of the final things I want to mention. We do have some numbers revealed. We know that one is from 10,000 years before Korra's time, so roughly 10,017 years or something like that ago. Now, immediately this felt a bit like such quite a low number, that it wasn't far enough in the past, because 10,000 years on the outset, like just seeing that number, oh, okay, that makes sense. But then you think about, wait, how many avatars have there actually been? We only know of like 4 or 5. We know Korra, Aang, Roku, Kyoshi, Kuruk, Yang Chen. So we know like 6 or 7 more or less, and then we know that there's the Firebender one before him. We've seen a few times, and then there's Wan as well. But have we ever had it established how many avatars there are? We know there's at least a few hundred from the 3rd episode in the Southern Air Temple with all the statues. But there's also 116, the desert. When Roku appears before Zhang asking him to teach Aang firebending, he says, "I've mastered the elements 1,000 times in 1,000 lifetimes." So that would suggest that there's somewhere around 1,000 avatars. And so, 10,000 years for 1,000 avatars, that means the average age of an avatar is 10. that doesn't quite add up. Now, whenever I've mentioned this, I've had a lot of people really try and like explain it away as just being like, oh, you can't take the number so literally, it's obviously a bit off. But like think about normal average ages or something like that. Even saying like back then it was probably super low, around 30, that's still off by 3 times. And to get it up anywhere near that, you either have to like lower the number of avatars to um, you have to lower the number of avatars to around 333 pretty much to get it down to 30 pretty much, because if you even put it in half as only being 500 avatars, you're still left with an average age of 20, which still seems incredibly low. So, you know, at that stage, it becomes less of, oh, Roku is probably over exaggerating 1,000 times. And, like, there's a huge difference between saying, like, oh, he's over exaggerated, say, 700 up to 1,000, and saying he over exaggerated 300 up to 1,000. And then you can sort of say, like, maybe 10,000 is a bit off. Maybe it's actually like more like 13,000 years or something like that. But again, you still need massive changes in the numbers that are established to get an average age as being normal. And there's obviously the idea that possibly a lot of avatars died young because of something that happened. But for the most part, we know when a lot of the avatars died. We know Aang died at like 66, 67, give or take a few months. Roku died at 70 exactly. Kyoshi was 230. We know, I think Karuk probably died at, I don't know, I'd have to like check it up, but I think it's around 30 or 40 when he died. He died pretty young. But still, like, that's more than 4 times the average that we seem to have here. Yang Chen, just by the looks of her in the moments we've seen of her, looks to be at least 40 or 50, but we assume that's not probably what she looked like when she died. And then the Fire Nation avatar before her looks a bit older as well. So from what we've seen, there's nothing really points towards anything incredible happening to make avatars have such a low age. So, what explains away this then? There is, obviously, as I said, the idea that maybe something happened and a lot of avatars in a row died very young due to something that happened, but that seems like a really morbid concept for them to introduce. Though I suppose they sort of did introduce it with Sozin, obviously planning to at least find and then he would kill the baby air nomad avatar or whatever, but he at least tried to attack it. But so yeah, the numbers are a bit off there, definitely. Obviously, something spiritual could happen, but still, it's a bit off. So I'm pretty much coming to the end of what I have to say here. I'm sorry it's been so disjointed, but there is a ton of stuff to talk about, a lot of questions that are just not answered at this stage. I really do want to know what you guys think in the comments about some of the stuff I've mentioned here, like did humans learn to bend the elements before the Avatar or after? What about the nations' names? Like, obviously before humans learned to bend, there had to have been, like, they had to have called something else, unless they literally called themselves the Water Tribe because they were close to water. They called themselves the Fire Nation because they had dragons. That idea that they called the nations after the animals, which were the kind of symbols of their nation, sort of thing. But there's a lot of different things, and then there's the energy bending thing I mentioned as well. In that, line turtles, we have it established from the library that at one other point besides Aang, an avatar did meet with a line turtle, and that this was probably something that happened regularly, and that avatars did in the past have the ability to energy bend, and that Aang is just the most recent one to do it, and there hadn't been an avatar in a while who'd actually done that. So there's that idea too, and that's really it, kind of sort of thing. A lot will be answered. I'll be very interested to look back on this video after we've seen those 2 episodes and get all the reveals from book 2, and to see how much of the stuff is actually answered, how much of the speculation I have I actually got right. And in many ways, that's why I'm doing this video. I'm doing it, one, because I think it's a fascinating topic to speculate on before we get the answers, but also because I'm looking forward to see if I was right and stuff like this. Like, this is a topic that I love to discuss in terms of Avatar, the first Avatar sort of thing, and I'm really interested to see how they go about explaining it and how much they really give us, because they can't just go around revealing everything. Like, as much as I don't mind exposition in shows, I think if they just explained everything that I want to be explained, it would take away from the story. Though I feel there is a way for them to tell us all the information without just literally telling us the information. It's going to be interesting to see how they do that. It seems like an idea they've had in place for a while. They were initially going to put it into Avatar: The Last Airbender, but couldn't find the right way to smoothly fit it in, and now they have through Book 2 Spirits. So yeah, I'm going to end it here. As I said, comment if you want about your own thoughts on this topic and some of my speculation, that sort of thing. But thanks for watching, and bye.